Hi everybody, so in this video I want to talk a little bit about academic referencing, or how to reference correctly. Oops, yeah, correctly. So you'll find that there are as many different ways to reference texts as you care to imagine. There are various styles or general guides, like there's the Harvard referencing system, sometimes called the author date system, which is the one I prefer. But you know, every journal, every book, pretty much everybody has their own style. I want to just give you some brief principles behind academic referencing, which we're going to be using on the Organisation Theory Practice course at Nottingham in your assessment, so that you know what we're expecting. So the general principle is transparency. Oops, transparency, how do you spell it? What does that mean? Well, here's my question. Why do we have references? Does it to show off that we've read some stuff? I mean, yeah, kind of. But primarily we have references because the references are evidence and they allow a reader to go and check up on your reasoning, to go and check up that what you've said, somebody said, is true. So if you haven't referenced correctly, that rather undermines your claims. If you haven't referenced correctly in a way that lets the reader go and actually find the text, well, you've not been helpful, you've kind of been a bit tricky, and it might lead people to suspect that you have been somewhat unethical, let's say. So the first principle is, whatever you do, it needs to be transparent. The next principle is, it needs to be consistent. I have a style of referencing, most people have styles of referencing. The thing which annoys many people when we're looking at work is not whether you've done our preferred style, but whether you've done whichever style you want to use correctly and consistently. So the styles are offered because they provide transparency. So whichever one you want to pick, whichever way you want to do it, as long as it's consistent and then it's transparent, you're okay. So what are we looking for when we do referencing? Well, we want to know the author of the text that you're referencing, who wrote it. We want to know the year that they wrote it, or more accurately, the year that it was published, because that helps us to identify text. So in an in-text citation, we need that information. So that might be that you just say, Simon says organisations are fun. So then you need the author and the year. Now here's where referencing starts to get tricky, because if your sentence is Simon says organisations are fun, well, we already know the author because it's Simon. And what we commonly do is then put the year next to his name. And the reason we do that is because if we have more than one author in a sentence, or if Simon writes several texts, we want to make sure that we know which text we're referring to at any given point. If we are making a quote, so that means anything within these marks here are not my words, but are literally the words written by Simon in his text, we also need to add the, sorry about that, everybody, I just had a phone call. So where were we? Yeah, we were just talking about you need a page number for a quote. And what that means is that as a reader, if I wanted to, I could literally go back, find Simon's text, find the right page, and check that he actually does say organisations are fun. Okay. So this is what you need in text. If it's a journal article, you have the author of the journal article here. You have the year that it was published and the page number that the quote comes on. Okay. If it's the author of a chapter in a book, you have the author's name there. If it's a book that's written by one person, you just have their name like that. Okay. So, when to cite? Well, when you're citing, if you're quoting anybody, you always need to cite. So direct quote. And if you're paraphrasing, which would be to say, there isn't a quote, but you're saying this is what somebody else said. So if you're saying, Simon says organisations are fun. The difference is, with a quote, you need a page number. When you're paraphrasing, you don't need a page number. Okay? Because the page number literally says, the text which I'm quoting appears on this page. And one of the reasons the year is so important is because books are often published multiple times in different years, and the page numbers can actually change. So I could go to the wrong copy and not find a quote. Okay? So that's in-text citations. The next thing is a references list. Not a bibliography, often misunderstood. A bibliography is all of the texts on a subject that you could have consulted, that you might have made reference to. For the purposes of most modern academic writing, we don't use bibliographies, we use references, which is the list of texts that I have referred to or cited in the document itself. So that might be direct quotes or paraphrasing. So any text that you've quoted from should appear in the references list. Any text that you've paraphrased should appear in the references list, and no other texts. In a bibliography you could have text that you hadn't referenced or cited. But anyway. So for a book, all you need is the author name, surname, initials, the year that it was published, the title in italics, and then the place and publisher's name. All of this is essential to let me, or anybody who's reading your work, go back and find a text. And it's all available, and usually in the front cover of a book. Oh, I just had an email. Okay. For a journal article, it's pretty much the same to start off with, but now you would put the title of the journal article, the name of the title of the journal, not the title and name we'd call it, wouldn't we? And then the volume, issue number, and first page and last page. Okay. If it was you don't need to put like the editor's name or anything like that. The only time you need to include that kind of stuff is if it's a chapter written in a book that has its own authors. So then you would put author of chapter, surname, initials, then you put the year that it was published, the title of the chapter or essay, and then you can sometimes you put in authors or editors of the book. You put the year again, don't know quite why, but you do. You put the title of the book in italics, then you put the place and publisher. Some people also put the page numbers, so first page and last page, not of the book, but of the essay. So that just means that I could literally go to the book, find it. So that's pretty much everything you would need to reference. If you have read an online version of a book, please don't feel that you need to put, like sometimes people put access on blah 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 or the URL. You don't need to do that. You only need to do that if it is something which isn't published physically, like a web page which only exists on the web. If it's a book and you just happen to be reading a PDF of it, don't worry about about putting that information, because it just burns your word count up unnecessarily. What you can then also do, just to make it look nice, is if you're working on Word, if you put the paragraphs as hanging, this makes life really nice, because you can now start to order your references list any way you want. So you could go like sort by, and that will put it in alphabetical order based on the first letter here. That makes it really nice, because when you're reading through something, you can look at a quote and then go and look at the text as you're reading it, which is really nice. Another top tip is if you go to Google Scholar, and let's look at like Herbert Simon. You'll see here there's this little quote. So if you find the text that you want, you'll see that they already give you a lot of the information, and all you need to do is cut and paste it. If you're looking up a journal article, usually it's even better because it gives you everything that you need. Now you see, if we have a look at this, the way that Google works typically is it doesn't put things like quotation marks or speech marks around things, it uses full stops. This is what I mean when I talk about style. Do I care, do most people care really whether you put, like, you know, that you could do this, put speech marks around it and a comma, or have a full stop? No, that doesn't really matter. Just try and be consistent with it. What's important though is that it's transparent and consistent, that I can find the text if I wanted to as the reader of your work. So that's academic referencing in a nutshell, or how to reference correctly. If you've got any questions about specific text that you want to reference, and you want any tips, I want to check the format, please leave me a question or comment below, or get in touch via some other means.